everyone for joining us today on Understanding On-Shelf Availability. We have Stacy Tan from Supply Pike. She has over a decade's worth of experience in the supplier world. We have Rick West, who is the CEO of Field Agents. We're doing kind of a mashup today of different companies, and we're excited to talk about on-shelf availability.
Excited to be here. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, I think we'll hand it over to Stacy and Rick to kind of talk about Field Agent and Supply Pike.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Melody. And like Melody said, as always, we are so excited to have everyone here hanging out with us, talking about on-shelf availability. I know that both Rick and I are going to be we're going to be beating a dead horse by the end of this, talking about OSA and out of stocks. But I mean, as everyone knows, it's really become a focal point for Walmart, over the last couple of years, and definitely this year, as well as we're starting to maybe hopefully come out of the pandemic days. But really quickly wanted to give you guys a very brief introduction of Supply Pike. If you guys have not joined a webinar with us before, we are a software company based out of Northwest Arkansas. So our office actually is in Fayetteville. So hop, skip, jumping away from good old Walmart and Sam's Club. As you guys can see here on the slide, we were born from K-Stack's Research and Development Department in 2016. And essentially what we do is we create cloud-based tools to help our supplier partners manage relationships with retailers, monitor the status of their business, and reduce cost and waste. And we do that in a couple of different ways and through different apps. So you guys may be familiar with our Deductions Navigator tool, which is aimed at helping you to recover invalid deductions. OTIF Radar, which is of course aimed at targeting invalid OTIF fines, and Retail Intelligence, which is really centered around sales and analytics reporting. And you guys can kind of see across the screen a couple of the brands that we are proud to consider part of the Supply Pike family. And I say this every time, but I really do hope that one day we'll be able to add your brand to this slide as well. And I think Rick's going to give us a quick introduction of Field Agent.
Yeah, so we are actually, 3 whole miles, I think, away from Supply Pike. Let's talk about neighbors. I mean, Stacy, we're just right down the street. And that's why I was joking about the snow data. It was like, a couple of days ago, we have a tornado go through. Now we have snow. March is crazy right now.
Yeah.
But again, located here in Northwest Arkansas, as Stacy said, a few miles down from our friends at Walmart. And Field Agent, think of us being a marketplace that has tools for you to win at retail. And our tools really have pretty broad spectrum of what we do. Everything from, auditing a store, which we'll talk about today, merchandising, fixing things, which again, we'll talk through that again today. But we also do some really interesting marketing, e-commerce things, and provide insights for our clients, all via our marketplace. And kind of our claim to fame is, we talk through, how you do work today. And if you think of coverage, cost, and speed, and the scale that you need to excel at retail, we would argue we're probably the only marketplace of a few people you'll engage that can be in virtually any zip code, anytime, 24/7 in the US, plus 7 other markets. So we come alongside to help you succeed at retail, and we'll give you a small taste of that today.
Awesome.
So as I mentioned before, we have Rick West with us here today. He's the CEO and co-founder of Field Agent. So glad that you guys got a little insight into what they do. And then we have Stacy Tan. So they're going to lead us on a journey of understanding like in-stocks, fandom inventory, on-shelf availability, all of that fun stuff. So we'll go ahead and jump into the content.
Alrighty.
All right. One thing I do want to do for housekeeping really quick before we actually get into this, if you guys have any questions, there's a little Q&A button down at the bottom. So hit that, type something in. We'll be asking questions throughout, but we will also reserve some time at the end so that we can do a little Q&A type session. So if you don't get your question answered throughout, we do have that time at the end. But if we are unable to get to it just through the volume of questions, which has happened before, so get your question in early, then we'll be following up afterwards and making sure that we follow up with you over email. Perfect.
As you think about the world of headlines, Stacy and I were talking about this, and I want to take people back. There's a new show that's on that's a remake of a show from the 80s and 90s called The Wonder Years. You may have seen that kind of pop up, this new branch of the show. And what you may not know is that the original Wonder Years, the dad of that show was in customer service, supply chain, product supply. That was his world. And he was always complaining. It's like, oh, I'm kind of like the armpit of the company. Nobody cares about us. No one cares about what I do. And what's been interesting in the world of supply chain, when you look at everything from COVID and Ukraine invasions and, all these kind of crazy things that are happening, every other word, Stacy, is supply chain, supply chain, supply chain. Are you supplying the troops? Another conversation for another day. But as we look at our world today, supply chain is at the forefront of conversations. And we want to take that broad conversation and make it not only important, but relevant, especially when you look at that. It used to be termed as the last 100 feet, last 100 meters of that supply chain, which is winning or excelling at retail. And the headlines really kind of give the beat of the drum, but we want to take it a little bit further, Stacy, and kind of really start engaging at those details at shelf. And gosh, when you think back, if you go to that next slide, we were looking back at some work we did back in March of 2020. And that's relevant because remember, that's the tipping point of COVID.
Yeah.
Remember those panic days of just, oh my gosh.
The toilet paper run. Oh my gosh.
There's no toilet paper anywhere. Well, what was interesting, companies came to us and said, yeah, we hear this in the news, but again, news stations would take one photo of one store and say, this is what's happening across the United States. So they came to us in March and said, hey, we just have to have some feel for what's really happening. So we audited 100 stores pretty quick, 5 categories, 10 different retailers. Get that next slide for us. And we said, when you look at stores being out of stock, what does it really look like? And here are some fun numbers. Disinfectant wipes, based on where you were, combined, non-West Coast, West Coast, close to 75% of the stores are almost completely out of stock for disinfectant wipes. But if you remember, the conversation was toilet paper.
Oh, that's a good point.
And so it was like, oh, of course, there's no toilet paper anywhere. Well, I'm not saying it was not an issue, but Stacy, just that piece of data help people say, oh, I need to start looking at things that would be tied to cleaning,
right?
Not just the toilet paper.
Right.
And it helped them start saying, well, what about hand soap? We would have never thought hand soap would be equating to toilet paper and bottled water, et cetera. So just by looking at a little bit of data, Stacy, it was crazy how people said, oh, I didn't even think I could be affected. I was reading the headlines too. I better get my arms around this before it becomes a big issue. I mean, think about those days. Weren't they crazy?
Absolutely. And kind of to your point, Rick, I'm thinking about, a lot of the supplier partners that we worked with, we saw these completely unexpected spikes in random products as well. Because to your point, the toilet run on toilet paper of March 2020, never forget, disinfectant wipes, hand soaps. But we work with a couple of, for example, toy manufacturers, and they were seeing these insane spikes in sales as lockdowns started to happen. And parents had to be like, well, I have to entertain these kids somehow. I can't take them to school. And so it is kind of crazy. It's so easy to take one, kind of to your point, to take one article or one headline or one picture. But really, it's so important to understand kind of the data that is really driving that so that you can have a better understanding of what's actually going on the shelf. So that's pretty interesting.
So that's history back in the day. People are like, yeah, Rick, we've already seen those. I mean, I get that. Let's fast forward to, I think we're going to look at the next, November 2021. That was just the other day. I mean, and supply chain, that's like dog years.
Really
so quick, right? But we went out and did the exact same thing again, still working with suppliers, asking the question, hey, at the height of product awareness. So this is where you're getting into refrigerators. And if you're building a house, you don't have garage doors. I mean, it seemed like everything was a mess. We went out and looked at 1,300 categories, couple hundred stores across Best Buy, Target, different places. And let's look at the photos from this next little slide. Surprise, surprise. Again, you guys are like, oh my gosh, it was that crazy. But it wasn't just toilet paper, pet food. You're like, well, intuitively, I guess that made sense, but video game consoles, because I'm trying to do things in home. And let's take a look at the numbers again, just interesting numbers, that next slide. So we looked at low stock and much lower stock, and this is everyday shoppers giving us their opinion. Now, we recorded actual numbers, but this is just their perception. Said, hey, Stacy, when you go in store, were they low or much lower than you thought? Well, video, 75% said it was low, 50% said it was much lower.
Okay.
I mean, again, that's kind of interesting you played out, but if you jump down to some of those lower categories about canned vegetables, laundry detergent, diapers, I mean, there was a day that you would never think that diapers would even be at 1%.
Right. Right.
And so it just helped us better understand as we were looking at this, is that A, it's a bigger problem than we thought. And B, while we were at the height of this, we still think we're not quite out of the woods. And so what was interesting for us is, as we started looking at this, yes, what are some ways to solve it? And Stacy, we're going to banter about that in a second. But
Yeah.
if we look at these numbers and believe that it's true, even if we cut that in half, it's still a really bad situation for us in supply chain. And so let's look at that next slide. And this is where you and I have talked before. In this whole phantom inventory, on-shelf ability, out of stock. I mean, look at this. Every other word you talk about today has something tied to supply chain, even inflation and global conflict. It's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I completely agree with you, Rick. It's kind of funny. I was actually having a discussion with another colleague of mine the other day, and it's, pre-COVID, kind of like the joke you were making about the Wonder Years, supply chain was always just like, it's a function and it's there. And it exists to move product from one place to another. And it was always a given, right? If I order something, it's going to show up, it's going to be on the shelf when I go to Walmart. I'm not really going to have to worry about it. But kind of to your point, just I would say the last 2 or 3 years has been such a squeeze, and it's just been constant. Right. I just, from COVID to like the labor shortages were a big deal last year. And now, of course, we've entered kind of the global conflict and inflation of 2022. And I'm reading articles, and I'm sure you are as well, that, there are expectations that the supply chain squeeze is going to continue on through 2023. And so it's kind of exactly what you're saying, becoming so important for suppliers to really start to shine a light on supply chain and not expect it to be a given anymore, which is a little scary, I think, for some people that have never really paid attention to it before.
It really is. So we've, for the folks listening to this, again, we've set now some bases. We have some baseline. Let's get into some definitions, because when we fly by, and I want to make sure that people understand, when Stacy says phantom inventory or Rick's talking about on-shelf availability, we're all talking the same language, because there's a little bit of nuances in there. And so you guys are looking at this next slide, and you guys can kind of read this yourself. But again, we're going to be using 3 terms pretty interchangeably over the next little bit as we get into real work in front of us. And the first one is on-shelf availability. And it simply means that, can I buy something on a shelf? Is it available for me to purchase? Not in a warehouse, not in the back room. Is it on the shelf that I can grab this and go purchase it? Out of stocks is just that. We're looking at a photo. That is an out of stock, people. Just in case you wanted to know, that's an out of stock.
Yep.
But the little thing that we're going to probe on today, which is kind of that silent killer that we'll talk through, is phantom inventory. You and I both know from your algorithm and what we've been checking today and the examples we're going to give folks, in many cases, that little blank square that shows nothing on the shelf, there's a decent chance, based on the numbers we're going to show, that Retail Link, their own system, says, A, there should be product there, and B, it should be fully stocked. Right. And we're going to help you understand that phantom inventory is bigger probably than you even thought. So those are the 3 key things we're going to talk through. And if we get the next slide for us, it's just really, here's a few words of wisdom. And Stacy, you and I talked about, hey, Rick, just give us a few things you've learned over the years. And, I've been in supply chain for a long time. Again, before it was cool. I was in supply chain.
We're never going to forget that one, Rick.
Never forget. But what was happening is, as we start looking at the really 12 years of work we've done within audits, on shelf availability, engaging, here's a few things that I know to be true. The first one is that if you have a slow moving SKU, you're really, really in trouble these days if you're not on top of it. Now, we all know if you've got, 20 units per store per week, 100 units per store per week, and you're a warehouse slot, listen, the machine is just driving inventory in, and the algorithm works so good. You guys are probably like 90+%. It is so tight. Mm-hmm. But I'm telling you, a slow moving SKU in today's world, by the time you see that 1 unit per store per week go to 0 next week, and you're not really sure what's going on, you wait for the algorithm to catch up, you're really in pretty rough shape, and you run the risk of losing the tag and having a really big problem. So slow moving SKUs or high value slow moving are really vulnerable. The next piece is, if I look at the statistics again, I agree. I think that, Stacy, everything in life is a bell curve. Bell curve is there, right? You've got 80% of the stores and regions are in pretty good shape. You've got 10% of the poster child, they're amazing. And you've got 10 to 20% that really struggle. Well, whether it's a year ago, today, or 6 months from now, you know what stores are still going to be struggling? It's the same stores. So
what, Rick? That never happens.
It's crazy, right? It's the 80-20 thing. So we've been telling our clients is that in limited resources, because of labor shortages and other things, now more than ever, trust someone like SupplyPike to say, trust me, the algorithm is fine. Because, and not only is it fine, these stores have always performed so well on shrink and other things. But when you look at these stores that have traditionally had problems, you've got to start engaging people like Field Agent to really get your arms around it, because it's always an issue. So all that being said is, when you have limited resources, you know where you need to put them. Low performing stores, more than ever, you need to hit it. And then like the photo we just saw, the grace period is ended for out of stocks.
Right.
If I've heard one person, Stacy, tell me this, I've heard 100, is that there was a day that even though I had an out of stock and there was that black hole, I knew that that department manager was going to wait because it was coming in, because the out of stocks are so apparent and there's so much pressure in today's world. If it's there, they're going to pop that tag. Worst case, best case, they're going to slide other facings over and not even worry about your SKU. That was not the case 2 years ago. And I don't know how that mentality is going to change. So that's the third piece. And gosh, really the fourth one is something we all know intuitively, but we do a ton of insights work here, Stacy, a ton. And the whining, complaining has turned into, I'm really frustrated. It's not just they're really frustrated with out of stocks. And I get it. I really do get it. And then finally, which we'll kind of jump into a second, the reality of, we know the information systems like Retail Link are not always accurate about OSA, which is why you come alongside to help build the algorithm. And that's really the meat of what we're going to get into today. So I kind of bantered about what I've learned along the lines. Thoughts about that before we kind of jump into the real issue today, which is phantom inventory.
Yeah, no, Rick, I completely agree with everything that you said. And you know, we see it and we feel it too from the SupplyPike side. And the only thing that I wanted to add on to is kind of your point about grace period ending for out of stocks. We're not only seeing that happen at the store level, which I love that you guys have that insight at the store level, because, you know, at SupplyPike, we're just a smidge removed, because, you know, we're really kind of data based and working within the algorithms. And I love that you guys have that boots on the ground visibility as well. But we're seeing that that grace period is not only ending in the stores, but kind of at Walmart corporate as well. So yeah, we had the opportunity to attend the supplier growth forum that was held earlier this month. And, you know, to those of you guys on the call that have maybe not attended before, it's basically Walmart's opportunity to kind of share their strategic initiatives for the rest of the year with the supplier community. And I think I heard the words OTIF and in stocks like probably close to 100 times that day, maybe more. And kind of the overall message that Walmart is really sharing with the supplier community today is, hey, we get it. Supply chain was tough. We get it. The pandemic was tough on a lot of suppliers over the last 2 years, but and we can argue whether this is valid or not and take that conversation offline. But to Walmart, hey, you know, we've given you guys enough leeway. We've given you enough time to kind of figure things out. And starting this year, you know, we're going to be tougher on in-stocks. We're going to be tougher on things like OTIF scores. We're going to, you know, continue to levy OTIF fines and SQIP fines and things like that. So, you know, you hear us talk about it a lot, that Walmart really cares about these things, but now they're really starting to kind of have rubber hit the road and really starting to actually implement these fines. So it's becoming a real dollar impact to suppliers. And another reason why you should really be caring about your OSAs and your out of stocks and your phantom inventory as well.
Yeah, so we'll keep that thread going throughout this conversation. So if I'm looking at tweetable quotes right now or information I need to write down, if we've learned nothing else over the last 15 minutes, is that the shoppers have reduced to eliminated the grace period
Mhm.
being okay with out of stocks. Department managers at store level, they're through with it. They're simply saying, hey, I'm taking down tags and shoving things over. And to your point, the corporate entities, whether you're Walmart or anywhere else, the grace period's kind of over. This is the new normal. We need to fix it. So that's one thing we've learned already today. The grace period's over.
Love that. Love that.
That's good.
Awesome. So I kind of wanted to, now kick the ball over a little bit into talking about phantom inventory. Rick has done an awesome job kind of introducing the concept of it. And, we call it the silent killer. It's a little kind of scary sounding, but we kind of wanted to talk you guys through what it is, how you can detect it, how it happens, and the most important part, of course, what you can do about it. So like Rick mentioned a couple of slides earlier. So essentially, phantom inventory is a scenario that happens when there is product that is being recorded as on hand at stores. So when you pull that data back in Retail Link, it's saying you have 1 unit or 10 units or whatever it is, but it may not actually be present on the shelf to purchase. So it may say you have 1, but really there's 0, or it may say you have 10, but really there's only 2, etc. So just kind of level setting, that is what phantom inventory is. You may hear your buyers talk about it. It is a real kind of problem within the supplier community. And really kind of thinking through what causes phantom inventory. So there are a couple of different things, and we'll kind of talk through that. And Rick, I'd love your input too, if you guys have seen this and experienced it as well, just again, kind of from that store level. So first one, easy enough, is replenishment errors. Basically, a great example of that is, hey, the product got received in at the store, it got scanned into the back room, but for some reason it never got placed on the shelf, or it got lost in a rack somewhere, or whatever it is. So to Walmart, yes, we've scanned in 5 units, but maybe it never actually makes it to the shelf. So that is a situation where you have product there, but people can't actually buy it. Another example of how phantom inventory can happen, of course, is shrink. So there are scenarios when sometimes people will take things that maybe they did not pay for. And if that happens, they didn't kind of go through the POS scan process. And how Walmart kind of records what's on hand is they, obviously take whatever is scanned into the store, marks that on hand. And as it gets sold off, then it, kind of takes down in how many units they have on hand. So if there's shrink, if someone has, let's pretend that Walmart thinks there's 1 unit on hand, but someone has stolen that unit, to Walmart, again, they're not going to record a sale. And so to them, there's still 1 unit on hand, but not actually anything there for customers to purchase. Other kind of less prevalent scenarios that cause phantom inventory, but definitely happen, are things like an improper handling of merchandise. So maybe it does make it to the shelf, but a store associate or maybe a customer accidentally damages the product. And, they say, oh, well, I can't sell this, so I'm going to trash it, or whatever it is. They don't record that as a damage. Kind of same scenario here. And then anytime there's an incorrect recording of sales. So maybe for whatever reason, the customer doesn't scan it correctly, or the UPC or barcode doesn't scan correctly, or whatever it is. Again, same scenario, Walmart does not record the sale. And so to them, you still have, 5 units on shelf or whatever it is, when in fact you may have none, or 1 or 2 or 3. Is that something that you kind of see in your work as well, Rick, with your agents?
It is. Yeah. One of the jokes we've told here is that just because Amazon Go has a store that says you can grab things and walk out, there's no such thing as Walmart Go. Okay. So just want to tell people that that's not a thing. It's not. Okay.
Yes.
But I think on the scanning errors is really interesting. As you look at, and I don't have the study behind of this, but I know anecdotally of things we've seen, is that the percentage of people that are doing self-checkout. I had a person literally last night tell me, because I was talking about what we're going to talk about today, they went, oh, so when I bought those 5 yogurts and I scanned 1 and hit 5, but there are 5 different flavors, that matters.
Oh, no.
And I said, yeah. I said, yeah. I said, that's a problem. I mean, so think about just the really good thing of self-scanning for all the right. And then you think of the multiplication factor of anything that's a flavor. Now, it may not be the, bag of this and bag of that, but if you're a multi-flavor, multi-thing, and this person said, I never really thought that'd be a problem. I just wanted to make it faster for me to check out. I mean, those are the little things we're learning as we go.
That's so interesting, Rick. I hadn't even thought about that, but I can totally see that happening. That's crazy. Yeah. So, now that we kind of know what phantom inventory is, kind of what causes phantom inventory, we really want to talk about what some of the effects of phantom inventory are as well. So, as you guys can imagine, phantom inventory is one of the big root causes behind in-stock problems at Walmart, as well as on-shelf availability problems. So, we've probably we're a broken record at this point, but obviously, if Walmart thinks that you have more than you have and you can't, customers can't actually buy it, you're going to really suffer through issues of potential lost sales and things like that. One of the reasons why we call phantom inventory that silent killer is because it sneaks up on you, right? So everything looks right on paper. So if I was just pulling a retail link report, once a week and everything looks fine, especially for those slow moving SKUs, like Rick mentioned earlier, I'd be like, oh, well, I didn't sell anything last week. That kind of feels right. And that kind of makes sense. And, usually it will take a long time. It'll take 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks before you start to go, this seems really weird. Like we should be selling a lot more than we actually are. It looks like I have product on shelf, but actually, maybe I might not be. And so again, by the time, like Rick was mentioning, by the time you've realized that that's happened, you may have lost that space on the shelf at the store. Your buyer may start picking up the phone and say, what is going on here? Why aren't you selling at the, unit velocity that we expected you to sell at? So that can be a little bit scary. And one other effect that I kind of wanted to talk through, which is, I think, another kind of scary aspect of phantom inventory, is as it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So when you have phantom inventory, you are selling less and less and less because there's, nothing on the shelf for the customer to buy. And as a result, Walmart is going to look at that and go, oh, their sales are dropping, so I'm going to drop their forecast as well. So Walmart orders less, they order less, people buy less, they order less, so on and so forth. So your forecast can become artificially suppressed as a result of phantom inventory. And this just starts this downward spiral of fewer orders and further lost sales. So it's something where, we really want to impress upon you guys, like phantom inventory isn't just a one-time thing where you go, oh, well, I have this problem and now I fix this problem and it's over. This is something that can happen continuously. And it's something that you need to be looking at all the time. Would you agree with that, Rick?
Yeah, absolutely. And we all know that the little things matter. What's interesting in this, which we're kind of pushing on, is that this little thing of 3 or 4 years ago now has become a fairly big thing.
Right.
And it's big enough that it's impacting some points, and those points add up to become a real problem. And so that's why we're, as we talked earlier, the reason we talked about this a month ago was that it's relevant enough that we've got to bring it back into the forefront, because people have to understand this isn't a little 0.5% problem over here. You're getting in the high single digits, even maybe a little bit higher of an issue. And those are real dollars you're missing out on, especially the long-term piece of the forecast. You and I both know, Stacy, it's all a math game, and you mess up the math. Unless you go in and make a change tomorrow, it takes weeks or months for the algorithm to get caught back up.
Yeah.
And we all run on math and a machine. So it's important to be able to understand it.
Yeah. And kind of to your point, Rick, even just now, as I'm thinking about it, even the earlier conversations that we were having with the supply chain squeeze, like it is just that much more important for you to get it right the first time. Because if you don't get it right the first time, you're battling algorithms, you're battling bad forecasts, you're battling, honestly, overworked buyers that just don't have time to necessarily look at your recommendations. You're battling having to try and, secure trucks and get loads to stores and things like that. So, I don't want to be the doomsayer.
No. But there's hope. We're going to talk about hope, Stacy. Let's talk about hope.
Exactly. So perfect, which is a perfect segue to talking about how you can put a stop to phantom inventory. So obviously, hopefully we've kind of painted a picture for you guys of the importance of, at the very least, looking at it. And trying to figure out what you can do about it. So we wanted to give you guys a couple of different options that you can utilize to really, again, shine that light on phantom inventory and figure out how you can put a stop to it. And why we're giving you guys a couple of different options is we know that every supplier is kind of on, their own path of supplying to Walmart. We work with some folks who, secured their first ever PO to Walmart, which is really exciting. And, they're going to be dealing with a different set of problems than folks that are, 25 years in Walmart with, 100 SKUs. And so we wanted to give different options that are available and will apply to different folks, just depending on where they are in their journey with Walmart. So the first option is really just utilizing kind of the resources that you already have available to you. So you do have the ability to pull data out of Retail Link. And to those of you guys who are newer to Walmart, again, kind of newer in your journey, you should have either heard of or already utilized an app called Decision Support. And that is really where you can pull a lot of this kind of POS forecast and pipeline data out of this app. So really kind of how I would recommend that you do it if you're doing this sort of DSS or decision support analysis is really kind of step one. You want to compare your recent POS or your sales activity at a store level. And you want to compare that against your store pipeline as well as your historical sales. So you kind of want to understand like, hey, today, what levels am I selling at? And then I also want to compare that to what levels I was selling at previously. And you can look at different kind of periods of time. Usually year over year is going to give you the most, kind of apples to apples comparison. But if you've just launched in the modular, you want to try and do kind of larger chunks of time. So like 4 weeks versus previous 4 weeks, 13 weeks versus previous 13 weeks and things like that. I kind of recommend against doing like week over week comparisons just because retail can fluctuate so significantly. Your item could have been featured in TikTok one week and you're going to see things sell at 20 times the normal rate. And so you want to make sure that you're establishing a baseline when you're comparing your POS against your historical sales. And then kind of once you've pulled that data, step two is going to be make sure that you are flagging a store if you have had historical sales, but maybe you haven't been selling at similar levels recently. So I'm just going to make numbers up, but let's say in store 100, which is in Bentonville. And yes, if you've been in the Walmart world long enough, store numbers, which is kind of sad. Or great, I'm not sure. But let's just say in store 100, historically you were selling at 10 units per store per week, which is awesome. But over the last 4 weeks, you've dropped down to 1 unit per store per week. But, that store has product on hand. So that's probably something where I would say, that doesn't seem to match my historical sales trends. I should be selling at that similar level. It says I have product on hand. So, I might flag that and say needs a little bit of investigation. And kind of from there, once you have that item store list generated, at that point, there are a couple of different levers you can pull with Walmart. So an example of that is you can say, hey, I want to send an SSO or DC push. So this is just a manual order that you can create and say, Walmart, I think there might be a phantom inventory issue. Let's go ahead and, send additional product to these stores to try and kind of kickstart the system again. And in some rare cases, you can even ask that Walmart performs an on-hand audit. So this one, and I think Rick can probably give us some insight into this as well. I have seen it happen before, but usually, and Rick, correct me if I'm wrong, Walmart, obviously this requires time for a store associate to go and do in multiple stores. So you want to use this one sparingly, and you really, really need to have a strong case to ask Walmart to perform an on-hand audit. Is that your experience as well, Rick?
Well, it is. It's like anything that happens in a store. You've got X amount of hours to do certain things. And if I'm a item number 50 on a list of 1 to 100, and I'm a little bit concerned, not sure what the department manager is going to do, but if I'm a high moving item with amazing margins, you might be surprised what you can get to do. But I think, but in all practical senses, is that the reason that we're talking you through this is that if you have no other tools, this is the right thing to do. Walmart would tell you, you should ask for an SSO and you should request this. The practical part is getting an SSO and getting someone to check it is few and far between, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't at least go down that path. Hence the reason we're giving people more than one option.
Right. No, you're so right, Rick. And you guys can kind of see, and I believe we'll be sharing this webinar and presentation at the end. So don't worry about having to take a screenshot or anything like that, but just wanted to, as Rick mentioned, give you guys multiple options. So obviously one of the advantages for this particular option is that it is quote unquote free. You can just pull this data out of Retail Link. But one of the considerations to kind of think about, like Rick mentioned, first of all, it's practicality. So whether or not Walmart will actually perform an on-hand audit, whether or not Walmart will actually execute on your SSO and things like that. And another thing to kind of think about is, obviously at the end of the day, when you are reliant on Retail Link, number one, you're reliant on their data, which, that's kind of one of the issues why phantom inventory happens. And then secondly, I'm preaching to the choir, I'm sure, with you guys, but obviously this can be a slow and timely process for your team, right? Because you have to go in, pull the data, analyze the data, make judgment calls, write SSOs, so on and so forth. So like Rick mentioned, definitely an option, especially, if you are kind of newer in your Walmart journey. At the very least, this is a really great place for you to start. So kind of moving on to that, the second option is you can hire a third-party company like our friends at Field Agent. But again, wanted to give you guys this option just so you know that it's out there. So I'm not going to steal Rick's thunder, but just to give you guys a high-level overview, the third-party company, like Rick mentioned, can physically audit stores and make on-hand adjustments for you. So companies like Field Agent will, have teams in place that can go to the Walmart stores, physically to the Walmart stores, and have kind of eyes on the product. And so of course, that's one of the obvious advantages, is they are physically present at stores. They can take pictures, they can count product, and they can basically tell you, hey, I know Walmart system says 12, it's actually 6 or whatever it is. So obviously you can't beat boots on the ground, especially if you're kind of looking into phantom inventory project. But kind of on the flip side of that, we want to be fair and offer advantages and considerations for both sides. It is a snapshot in time. You're hiring them to kind of do a one-time audit. And depending on, again, where you are in your Walmart journey, it may or may not be cost prohibitive. So it just depends on what your budget is and what options you have available. And I know we're going to be going a little bit more in depth in kind of an audit project that we did together, Rick, but would you add anything just kind of at this high level for now?
No, we're going to get into a little bit more detail in a couple of slides. So keep going.
Sweet. Okay, cool.
I'm gonna do for in between slides. We did have a question if there's a glossary that has all of these terms listed somewhere, so that there's lots of questions that come in on what this all means. We do have a glossary. We can send that out in the follow-up after this, but you'll also get, like Stacy mentioned, a link to the slide deck, which has a lot of these terms defined in the beginning of the deck. So you'll get both of those things. We'll make sure we send it out to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Melody. All righty. And then kind of option 3. So, and also want to throw out there, you can use any of these options like in succession or in combination with each other. Again, we just wanted to give you guys just different things to consider. So option 3 is utilizing a software company. So you can implement software that aggregates and stores data for easy accessibility. So, I kind of mentioned all of that work in option 1. There are software companies out there like the Five Hike that, other companies as well, but what they do is essentially they do that manual work for you. So rather than you having to go and pull that data, clean it, analyze it, and make recommendations, there are software companies out there that specialize in locating and kind of giving you probabilities around phantom inventory that then you can take and either decide to write orders or take that data and work with a company like Field Agent. Again, companies that will do this manual work for you. So of course, one of the advantages is you have visibility into data at any moment, and it reduces that time spent on manual reporting. So rather than having to dedicate a person to pull and clean and store these reports, you have the ability to kind of do that at a click of a button. And then other considerations to think about, of course, at the end of the day, it is software. So it isn't boots on the ground. So you are still kind of reliant on that software piece. And then also, there may not be a personalized and strategic feedback from an external audit team who will be able to say, hey, based on the numbers that we're seeing, this is what we recommend that you do. So So all of that said, one of the things that the field agent and supply pipe teams wanted to do is kind of give you guys an illustration of what an OSA audit can look like for you in real life. So for this particular example, and again, I'm not going to steal Rick's thunder, but this would be an example of how you could combine option 2 and option 3. So how do you utilize a company that can automatically kind of surface these insights for you through software, and then you take those insights and work with a company like Field Agent to kind of verify, make sure that it's all true, and then they can personalize recommendations on, okay, based on this, this is what you need to do next with your Walmart team. So I think Rick is going to kind of give us an overview of how all of that went down.
You got it. My job is to land the plane. We're going to land the plane because we talked about history, we're in theory, and now we're in the practical. What do we do? So let me tell you what happened in the last 5-6 days. In the last 5-6 days, working with supply pipes. Let's get to the bottom of this. What's it look like? So we surveyed 85 Walmart supercenters across 30 states. Shameless plug. You can look at our blog to see full results. We always good to do a shameless plug. Next slide from me, Stacy. And so supply check based on their algorithm, what they know, said, hey, let's give you 3 fairly broad generic SKUs in different categories to take a look at. So we looked at checkout stations, sporting goods, and baby toy. Took a look at those 3. You guys provided some OSA figures to us from Retail Link, as well as potential for phantom inventory. We said, let's take that, get into the real stores during a very tight time frame, and let's see what the realities are. And so, Stacy, drum roll, let's kind of jump into this a little bit. Next slide for me. So we asked these questions. Agents, everyday people going into stores saying, were you able to locate it? And in order for to validate, because people would say, yeah, Rick, they went in, but how do you know? They took a picture of the shelf, they scanned the UPC. So guess what? We always double check photos to make sure that we're keeping honest people honest. You can't lie on the UPC is scanned. It's what it is, what it is.
Right.
And they said, hey, there's only 3 on the shelf. Believe it or not, between our algorithms, image recognition, and actual eyeballs, we actually count the items. And if they said 3, we quantify that it's 3. And then we took another photo of just whether or not the shelf tag was up, et cetera. So when I talk about the data in front of us, Stacy, just know that we have checked and double checked, and that's part of the QC rigors we do. And part of the beauty of Field Agent is that scale we talked about, but amazing QC. So let's look at real numbers. The first one is that durable item, okay? $10 item that's out there. 85 occurrences, N equals 85, 89% was able to locate the item.
Okay.
So 11% said no. Well, okay, I mean, it's 11% of the folks said they couldn't find it. Then we said, hey, of the 11%, which were 9 people, was the shelf tag present? And what's the kiss of death? The shelf tag is gone. So in 2/3, okay, 6 out of the 9, no shelf tag.
That's scary.
And it just hurts your heart because you're like,
That's
oh,
scary.
no, it's like no shelf tag. Okay. And then we looked at the average. Look at this average number on the right-hand side. How many unique packages? Average was 20, but most common 3. That tells you, gosh, there's some very broad, looks at inventory. And we said, well, okay, Rick, that's fine, but give me a little bit something else. Let's go to the next slide. Compare it to what was happening in supply. This is what we were looking at, right? This is the algorithm and the data. So again, we went out and checked. Retail Link said there should be 3,417 units. We counted 1,522. Just thought I'd let you know, Stacy, we counted 1,522.
Oh gosh.
That's a difference. And then your machine learning algorithm predicted with a 91% accuracy what would happen in this scenario. And so we went from history to theory. This is practicality. So if you're out there today and you're wondering, we'd love to be able to take X number of stores to help you understand what reality is for you. But someone say, yeah, but that's just one item. Stacey, let's talk about a couple other items.
Yes, let's do it.
Sporting goods. All right. 85. Look at that number. 14% they couldn't find it. 50% of the time, no shelf tags. You're still not good. but at least the average and most common, items inventory is pretty good. But let's look at the next slide on our numbers.
Yeah, and I wanted to throw out there too, Rick, it's kind of crazy that I love that you guys provide the range, and I was seeing that in the other slide as well. Some stores have 1 and some stores have 92. Like,
it's crazy.
that is an immediate conversation to my replenishment manager if I see something.
Yep,
like
exactly.
Oh my gosh.
So the next slide for us, again, this got back into the expected 576 counted 440. So again, 23% difference and about 81% accuracy there. But let's look at this next item, which I thought was bizarre. And this is, man, the baby toy items. So, all right, 36% I couldn't find it. And gosh, of those 31, 84% have missing price tags. Now, again, I don't know whether this is a fast moving or slow moving. What I do know, it's not consumable and it's not moving 200 or 300 a day. I mean, so we know that. So this is one of those classic examples of probably, in theory, a little slower moving item. And the price tag is gone. By the time anything catches up with this, you're in so much trouble. It's just gone. You've lost a month's worth of sales to make it happen. And the range was interesting as well. So let's look at this next slide. Same thing. We counted 547 or expected 547, but we didn't find too many units. There's that 70% variation there. And even your algorithm was kind of way off on this one. It's like, man, that must be a mess.
Yes, 100%.
And what that looked like. So let's kind of look at the combined results slide, get into this. So when we looked at out of stocks and no tags, about 20% of the total SKU combinations we had, you couldn't find, and about 17% were critically low in inventory. In other words, 1 or 2 units. It was just a kind of a sad snapshot when we looked at this. Now, again, I'm not saying that you can project this out, but what I can tell you is we would have hoped 2 out of 3 were in really great shape, but they weren't, Stacy.
Yeah.
It's kind of a mess. So from our standpoint, as we get ready to summarize and get into Q&A, we have 2 chances for Stacy and Rick to give shameless plugs. Here's our shameless plug. Knowing what's happening in reality today. If you get that next slide for us. We have a Win at Walmart section on our marketplace. We have amazing tools to help you understand. If the only thing you take from this today from a field agent perspective, and you've done some manual work and you just don't know, don't fly all over the country. Go to our marketplace. It's the best $10 a pop you've ever spent. Spend $100 today. Get some idea of what reality is, and you can go home and rest, or you can say, "Oh my goodness, it's worse than I thought."
Right.
Got a problem there. And my last shameless plug there. This week, we're a Walmart approved vendor for ratings and reviews. I have to put that in advertising. It's like a sponsorship. If you're listening to a blog post, you have to do the sponsorship. Now, word from our sponsors. So we're approved to do that.
That's so funny.
I'm going to segue to you.
Yeah, no, and I love that you shared that, Rick, because it's so funny. So prior to being at Supply Pack, I lived in the supplier world for a long time. And kind of to your point, we would regularly, which I'm sure a lot of our supplier teams are doing, we would regularly go into all of the Northwest Arkansas Walmarts, and we would all kind of, I'm going to Bentonville today. Are you going to Springdale or whatever it is?
Exactly.
Or, we would say, okay, hey, we are going to Dallas or Chicago or New York for a show, for example, and we're going to make sure that we hit a couple of Walmarts while we're there. But kind of to your point, that is so, I know we kind of said, hey, sometimes it can cost money to do things like this, but you want to know what's even more costly is phantom inventory. But also, if you're only able to check a Walmart stores when you go to a trade show, like that's not
going to get it.
Yeah, that's not it. And hey, okay, I can go to 5 stores at most with my team, right? Versus being able to utilize a company like Field Agent and say, hey, I have a budget of $500. Let's hit 50 stores across the United States. And let's get a real picture of what's going on. So I think there's real power there. And
the truth will set you free, Stacy. I'm telling you, the truth will set you free.
Absolutely.
And these aren't assumptions. You're going to find out real truth at a specific point in time. But then as you look at the reality in front of us, if you've got 10 SKUs, 50 SKUs, 100 SKUs, and you're really feeling this, let's jump into what Supply Pack can do. So you guys are going to come alongside and say, listen, I appreciate all the spreadsheets and math and the little sticky notes you've got, but you guys can help them really understand the world, can't you?
Yes. And Rick, I feel personally attacked about the sticky notes because I lived in the world of sticky notes.
Don't do it.
Fire world. Yes. And so kind of to Rick's point, my turn for a shameless plug. So we have an app called Retail Intelligence. I talked about it just a smidge at the top of the call today. And essentially what it is it's automated reporting out of retailing. So phantom inventory is just one of the things that we do. We can also pull sales, replenishment, fill rate, on-time percentage, kind of do quartile reports, help you identify what your top selling stores are. We've even got metrics around like store opportunities. So for example, we will take the same machine learning algorithms that we utilize for phantom inventory. We'll take a look at the stores that you're selling really, really well in and look at any stores that you're not traded in currently and make recommendations for you to increase your store count. So we have helped our team save literally thousands of hours on having to wait on good old DSS, as we know is
right.
So reliable from time to time, to being able to like generate insights and generate reports literally within seconds. And and Rick can kind of speak to this on the power of being able to be seen as a trusted partner to Walmart, right? So
scale is important. It's so important. Yeah.
Exactly.
And so if you look at this, let's get to that summary slide so we'll get to a little bit of Q&A. I love this summary slide. You guys can read through this, but this quote at the very end, guys, if you took nothing to heart and you were talking internally for support to get funding to engage field agent or supply pipe, or you're trying to get resources to do X, just throw out this quote. We don't have a problem with demand. Fernand's like, listen, I got all kinds of people coming to my store. I don't have a problem with that. We have a problem with supply.
Yeah.
And loyalty in retail is the absence of something better. He's hinting at, if you're on the Walmart team and you're with me, we need sales to happen in these stores. And so I think that's a great quote for us to end on, and possibly take a couple of questions for Q&A. If not, we might even give someone the gift of time of 5 or 6 minutes to get to their next meeting. So having said that, come on, Melody, what do you think?
Yeah, so we actually do have a couple of questions. And I think that we might be able to give some time back if these are easy ones. So do they separate Canada from US on this review tool? I'm not sure. I guess maybe both of you guys could kind of answer that from a supply pipe and field agent perspective.
Yeah, our data would be exactly the same, but it would be two separate, pieces of data coming in. We try not to meld things into North America. It would be Canadian specific retailer data, and it would be, US specific retail data coming in. Now, once the data comes in, obviously we can put that together, but it would be two separate data pools and two executions.
Oh, that's so interesting, Rick. So and this is so I'm learning as well. So you guys can do store audits in Canada as well?
Absolutely. It's Canada and 7 other countries. So we're in pretty good shape. So for North America, especially if you're Walmart folks that are here, it blends in a little bit. And so it's an easy button for us. So yeah.
Okay, that's really cool. And from the supply pipe side, just wanted to share, yes, we also support Walmart Canada data, and kind of like what Rick was mentioning, because to Walmart, they are kind of two separate entities. We also pull that data separately, but we are able to pull back the same sort of, supply chain replenishment and sales analytics as well within retail intelligence. That's a great question.
Perfect. Another one is a question around inventory in the back of the room. So how are you able to maybe count what is on hand, and how does that even affect like the phantom inventory map at supply pipe? You guys want to both kind of take that one, like backroom inventory. How does that affect some of the stuff we've been talking about today?
Yeah, from our perspective, obviously we're not sending people back in the back room to go chase and look for. We're really looking at that on-shelf availability to be able to purchase kind of the phantom inventory, piece associated with it. What we can find is that once we realize there's a problem, through our various products, we can actually go back into that back room, bring that product back out, fix the shelf tag to make sure it's okay. From an algorithm standpoint, Stace, you'll have to kind of talk through that on how you look at backroom versus on hand and how you would parse that.
Yeah, that's a very good question, Rick. So as far as what we consider to be on-hand inventory, it's a one-to-one with what Retail Link is reporting, but our phantom inventory tool does take into consideration what we believe is actually on shelf to sell. So kind of the answer to that is both, really. We're reporting both Retail Link's on hand number. And then also we assign a probability within our phantom inventory map on like, hey, we actually do think that there's product there, or no, we don't actually think there's product there. So a little bit of both.
Very cool. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions come in. So if you guys have anything else, we'll give you one minute to ask it. But I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We always really appreciate seeing you guys. And if you have any additional questions that you just didn't feel comfortable for some reason sharing here, those are their actual emails right there on the screen. So we have Rick's and we have Stacy's. Please reach out to them or go to our website. And let me actually send those links right now in the chat. Check out either of the websites. Both of us have links in order for you to set up some time with us. So please do that. And if you guys have any additional questions, let me check one more time as I send this in. Oh, one more question. Oh, it's just a thank you. Well, thank you guys.
That's good.
Perfect. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Stacy. It's always great to see you both. And everyone, enjoy the rest of your Thursday.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Bye, everybody.